Every time this thing goes off, something's getting close.
On a road near the mountains, James is driving his car at a dangerously high speed. For a brief moment, he gets distracted and almost crashes into a truck in front of him. At the last second, he swerves the car to avoid the collision. But while doing so, he runs over several suitcases lying on the road. A young woman named Mary rushes over to collect her belongings, and James quickly gets out of the car to help her pick them up. Unfortunately, they are too slow. Nobushi was supposed to take leaves without her. Mary explains that she was originally heading to the city, but now she has no choice except to return to her hometown, Silent Hill. Feeling guilty for ruining her trip, James offers to drive her there as an apology. As they talk, a strong wind begins to blow and thick clouds slowly move in, covering the sun. Mary calmly explains that this kind of weather is common in Silent Hill and calls it a summer storm. Suddenly, the scene shifts. Mary appears to be drowning underwater, struggling to breathe. In the next moment, James suddenly wakes up in a nightclub extremely drunk. His phone keeps ringing again and again, but he ignores it and continues drinking. A waitress approaches him and tells him that it's time for him to leave. When James stands up, he accidentally bumps into her, causing her to drop several glasses on the floor. A bouncer quickly walks over to remove him from the club, but James reacts aggressively and shoves the man onto a table. While trying to grab his ringing phone, the same bouncer grabs him from behind. James headbutts him to break free, but two more bouncers immediately grab him and drag him outside. They throw him out of the club, and he lands on a pile of trash. His phone starts ringing again. This time, James finally answers it. The call is from his therapist. She is disappointed to hear that he is drunk and reminds him that he shouldn't keep blaming himself for everything. She tells him to go home and get some rest because he has an appointment the next day. Back at his apartment, James looks at a painting he made of Mary. For a moment, her face flashes in his mind. Trying to forget everything, he reaches for another drink, but his last bottle is empty. Frustrated, he throws the bottle on the floor and watches it roll across the room until it stops beside an envelope with his name on it. Curious, James picks it up and opens it. To his shock, the letter is from Mary. In the letter, she writes that she knows it has been a long time since their breakup, but something important has happened, and she needs him to come to their old home in Silent Hill. Without wasting time, James decides to drive there in the middle of the night while a violent storm rages outside. When he reaches the mountain tunnel that leads to the town, he discovers that it is closed. With no other option, he drives back to the bus station, parks his car, and decides to sleep there for the night. While sleeping, he dreams about the past and the memories he shared with Mary. After he first drove her home, they started dating, and eventually James decided to stay in Silent Hill with her. Sometimes when they kissed, her nose would suddenly start bleeding and the blood would drip onto his face. Despite everything, they continued their relationship. Eventually, their relationship fell apart, and after the breakup, James moved back to the city where he slowly became an alcoholic. The next morning, James decides to continue his journey on foot and walk the rest of the way to Silent Hill. After wandering through the woods for quite some time, he notices that the entire area is covered in thick fog and ashes are falling from the sky. Nearby, he sees a woman named Angela struggling with some heavy bags. James helps her move them and asks her about the strange ash falling everywhere. Angela explains that during the summer, there was a massive fire that burned the entire forest. The fire kept spreading until it finally stopped when heavy rain fell. Because of the floods, the town's water treatment plant was overwhelmed and the water supply became contaminated. After that, many people started leaving Silent Hill. Even after hearing this, James continues moving toward the town while thinking about Mary. He remembers that when he first agreed to move in with her, she confessed that she was afraid her true nature might scare him away. James had promised her that no matter what happened, he would always stay by her side. After a long walk, James finally reaches Silent Hill. The town is completely covered in fog and ash. He begins shouting, hoping someone will respond. But the streets remain silent. Suddenly, he hears music playing somewhere nearby. He follows the sound until he enters a tunnel where a small radio is playing. On the ground, there is a blanket with someone lying underneath it. When James tries to speak to the person, he suddenly hears a strange noise behind him, and the radio abruptly stops working. At that moment, a homeless man jumps out from under the blanket and warns James that they are coming back. However, he refuses to explain what he means. Feeling uneasy, James quickly runs out of the tunnel. Soon after, his therapist M calls him again. But he ignores her angry voice because he notices a glowing sign above the door of a nightclub. Meanwhile, the homeless man sees a strange monster known as the Lying Figure appearing at the entrance of the tunnel. When James enters the nightclub, he remembers the time Mary once brought him there and introduced him to her friends. Everyone in town knew her well because her father had built the town and given its people purpose. Suddenly, James hears the homeless man screaming outside. He rushes back to the tunnel to check on him, only to find the man's body dissolving on the ground. At the same moment, the radio begins emitting loud static noises. When James looks up, he sees the terrifying Lying Figure approaching him. The creature opens its chest and sprays acid toward him. James quickly dodges the attack and throws a nearby tool at the monster, knocking it down. The creature then crawls under a van and disappears into the sewer system. Right after that, the radio starts broadcasting an emergency message telling all residents to evacuate the town immediately. An alarm begins echoing throughout Silent Hill, and several lying figures suddenly appear on the streets. A strange darkness spreads across the buildings and the ground. James grabs the radio and starts running through the streets while dodging the monsters and their acid attacks. After running for a long time, he suddenly trips and falls. All the rats in the area scatter and run away. To his horror, strange cockroach-like creatures called creepers crawl out of a metal grate and attack one of the rats, dragging it back to their nest. One of the insects approaches James, and he quickly smashes it with his foot. But the moment he does that, hundreds of creepers begin pouring out and chase after him. James runs desperately through the streets. In one alley, he sees the creepers attacking and killing a lying figure. While running, he falls again and accidentally drops the tool he was carrying. The creepers quickly swarm over it, preventing him from picking it up again. Eventually, James reaches a fence and escapes by crawling through a hole in it. The creepers begin climbing the fence, but can only watch as he gets away. James runs into a nearby apartment building and quickly locks the door using wooden planks. Moments later, the creepers arrive and start crawling all over the glass windows, staring at him from outside, but unable to enter. As James looks around the dark building, he suddenly sees a bleeding woman standing behind him. But when he turns around, she has completely vanished. Using the flashlight on his phone, James shines light toward the staircase and briefly sees a figure disappearing upstairs. He wonders if it could have been Mary and remembers the day they first moved into this building. James climbs the stairs to the next floor, but discovers that the staircase leading higher is blocked by a metal gate. While searching the floor, he enters one of the apartments and finds a glowing television. Next to it sits a box filled with videotapes labeled with different months from the year 2017. As he steps closer, he suddenly experiences a disturbing vision of blood-covered hands touching a body. The pain becomes overwhelming, and he collapses to his knees as a loud, ringing sound fills his head. The visions continue, so James quickly calls his therapist M and tells her that his head hurts badly. She asks where he is, but James simply says that he is getting closer. At that moment, his phone dies because the battery runs out. James steps onto the balcony and feels the rain falling on him. In the apartment above him, he sees a dark silhouette standing there. Meanwhile, M keeps trying to call him but cannot reach him. She then makes a mysterious phone call and tells someone that her patient has violated the procedure and she needs a wellness check. Back in the building, James climbs up the balconies to reach the apartment above. When he enters, he realizes that the silhouette was actually a cluster of moths covering a mannequin. Looking at the mannequin's dress reminds him of a similar dress Mary once owned. At the back of the room, there is a strange light. James follows it and finds a flashlight placed inside a disturbing shrine made of plastic heads and filled with more moths. This discovery triggers another memory. One day, when James returned from the grocery store, he found Mary surrounded by a group of strange, gothic people sitting in darkness. They were telling her that love can twist a person's mind and that she needed to stay focused. As soon as they noticed James watching them, they quickly opened the curtains and started acting friendly before leaving the apartment. James felt extremely uncomfortable because these strange people kept showing up without warning. However, Mary defended them and said they were her only family since her father had died. James apologized for his reaction and hugged her, but he was disturbed again when he noticed the strange shrine with a head inside it. Mary immediately shut the shrine doors and told him not to think about it. She then distracted him with a kiss. Back in the present, James finds a medical report from Brookhaven Hospital mentioning a severe asthma attack with Mary's name on it. At that moment, he hears someone coughing nearby and goes to investigate. Inside a bathroom, he finds a sick and exhausted man named Eddie vomiting into a toilet. Eddie asks why James doesn't look sick like everyone else. James explains that he is searching for someone, which makes Eddie laugh. He tells James that there is nobody left in town. Eddie explains that something terrible happened in Silent Hill. Fires burned the forests. The water became contaminated, and people started going insane. Many people were bleeding to death in the streets before the monsters began appearing everywhere. To prove his point, Eddie shows James a rotting wound on his arm and tells him that James is lucky. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a baby crying somewhere in the distance. The two men follow the noise until they reach a corridor that is blocked by metal bars. On the other side, they see a little girl named Laura trying to hide. Eddie suggests they should leave her there, but James refuses. He reaches through the bars and gently tries to convince her to come with them. Just as Laura is about to grab his hand, the radio suddenly begins screeching loudly, and a terrifying sound echoes down the corridor. Eddie panics and insists that they need to leave immediately. James is suffering from another intense headache, but he refuses to abandon the girl. As the noise gets closer, Eddie shouts at Laura to hide again. Then he suddenly kicks James and runs away. When James looks up, he sees the source of the noise, a horrifying creature known as Pyramid. Head is approaching while dragging an enormous sword. Pyramid Head reaches through the bars trying to grab James, forcing him to run away. While the monster begins smashing its head against the bars to break them, and James encounters a mannequin monster standing in the hallway. The mannequin suddenly turns toward him, but its head falls off and rolls across the floor. The eyes on the head continue staring at James, while the body twists and transforms into a spider-like creature. James runs again, as the creature reattaches its head, and insects crawl out of its mouth. After bursting through another door, James enters an apartment where all the windows are sealed shut. He can hear the spider-like mannequin approaching, so he hides inside a closet and watches through a small crack. The creature searches the apartment for him, but suddenly Pyramid Head bursts into the room as well. The spider monster immediately jumps on Pyramid Head, but the massive figure easily throws it onto a table and smashes its limbs with his giant sword. He brutally beats the creature while James struggles to stay silent inside the closet. After destroying the spider, Pyramid Head slowly walks to the closet and opens it. He stares directly at James, who notices human eyes staring at him from inside the helmet. Suddenly, the town alarm begins wailing loudly again. Both Pyramid Head and the spider creature grab their heads and scream in pain as the sound echoes throughout Silent Hill. Hours later, James wakes up inside the closet and realizes he is completely alone. When he steps out, he notices that everything around him suddenly looks normal again, as if nothing had happened. Lying on the floor nearby is Angela. When Angela sees him, she quietly tells him that he can't save her. James moves closer, desperately demanding to know what she means, but Angela quickly pulls out a knife and keeps him away. Moments later, she breaks down in tears. Confused and disturbed, James runs out of the building. Outside, he notices Laura standing on top of a wall. She asks him to catch her before she jumps down. In her hand, she holds a doll and tells James that Mary gave it to her. When James tries to ask her more questions, Laura suddenly notices something in the distance and begins running away. James follows her, not noticing a mysterious figure slowly appearing in the fog behind him. Laura eventually reaches a park and runs inside a maze. James tries to follow her, but the maze quickly confuses him and he gets lost. Suddenly, a woman named Maria appears behind him and asks what he plans to do next. She explains that he's the first normal person she has seen in weeks and says they should stick together since there is strength in numbers. The two of them eventually manage to find their way out of the maze. However, as soon as they reach the street, the radio begins screeching again. A lying figure appears nearby, so James and Maria quickly hide behind a car. Maria nervously grabs James's hand while they wait. The monster spits acid onto the ground before slowly walking away. Once the danger passes, they step out from hiding, and James suddenly notices a building that triggers another memory in the past. While wandering through the city, James once saw Mary being dragged away by her strange friends. He followed them into an alley where he found a fence covered in posters. He tore the paper away and pushed through the fence, only to discover another fence blocking the other side. Then he noticed smoke rising from the ground. After moving the trash aside, he discovered a hidden hatch marked with strange symbols. When he pressed a button, the hatch opened. James went down the stairs and found a network of tunnels where he could hear the eerie group chanting, back in the present. Maria takes James to the hospital. Inside, James looks through patient files while Maria finds a collection of tapes containing medical recordings. When they play the tapes, a doctor's voice can be heard describing various symptoms and suggesting that they may be caused by exposure to an unknown substance. At the end of the recording, the doctor asks a patient for her name, and the patient answers that her name is Mary. Maria then tells James that there used to be rumors about a cult in Silent Hill that continued worshipping Mary's father even after his death on another tape. The doctor mentions that Mary had been drinking a mysterious potion for years and that she once admitted it made her feel complete. Hearing this triggers another memory for James. In the tunnels, he once saw a crowd wearing black robes, forcing Mary, who wore a mask, to drink from a small bottle. Afterward, they lowered her body to the ground and began drinking her bodily fluids. Someone was recording the entire ritual with a video camera, meaning the ritual was captured on the tapes James and Maria had just discovered. James suddenly snaps out of the memory when another severe headache hits him, and the town's siren begins wailing once again. When his hand touches the floor, a dark corruption begins spreading across the room, making everything look rotten and decayed. Maria quickly pulls James out of the room, but they soon discover that part of the building is destroyed and engulfed in flames. Maria grabs a metal bar from a wheelchair, and the two of them take another corridor while searching for a way out. As they move through the hospital, they pass many rooms filled with monsters. Eventually, they enter a large room filled with terrifying bubblehead nurses. The nurses are holding various tools and appear completely frozen at first. Suddenly, one of them starts banging on a stretcher, waking the others. The nurses begin chasing James and Maria. The pair quickly run through the nearest door and continue running down the corridor. Eventually, they reach an elevator, but when they press the buttons, nothing happens. Realizing they are trapped, James decides to fight back. Using the metal bar, he starts smashing the nurses' heads and knocking them down. Despite his efforts, one nurse manages to slip into the elevator and stab Maria before James throws the monster back out. This time, when he presses the button, the elevator doors finally close, crushing several nurses' arms as they try to force their way inside. As the elevator begins moving upward, James notices that Maria's wound is bleeding badly. The elevator suddenly stops midway, forcing James to pry the doors open with the metal bar. He lifts Maria and carries her into a nearby room where he finds bandages and treats her injury. While resting, Maria observes that James looks at her the same way he used to look at Mary, suggesting that she resembles Mary very closely. This makes James uncomfortable, so he tells Maria to stay there while he goes to check the next floor. At the top of the stairs, James finds a locked door. As he struggles with it, Laura suddenly appears behind him and shows him her doll again. This time the doll looks disturbing and cries like a real baby. Laura angrily accuses James of abandoning Mary, which triggers a painful memory of him leaving Mary alone in their apartment. Laura then tells him that he must find Mary before it is too late and quickly runs away. James follows her until she hides inside room 318. When he enters the room moments later, Laura runs out and locks the door behind him. James bangs on the door and shouts at her, but then he hears a strange sound. Suddenly, a hospital bed appears on the ceiling covered by giant sheets. Laura speaks to him through the keyhole, asking why he came here. The sheets slowly open, revealing a horrifying humanoid creature whose nose drips blood onto James's face, just like Mary's used to when they kissed. When James says Mary's name, the creature suddenly grows 4 arms and grabs him. One of its hands forces its way into his mouth, leaving James struggling to breathe, while Laura calmly tells him to come back when he's ready. Suddenly, James wakes up and finds himself lying in a hospital bed. Panicking, he starts screaming until a doctor tries to calm him down and explains that he is in Brookhaven Hospital in Silent Hill. When James asks about Mary, his therapist M enters the room and gently tells him that he needs to accept the truth because Mary has been dead for months. James breaks down crying as he tries to understand his memories. Later that evening, something finally returns to him. After the ritual, Mary once came back to the apartment, and James insisted that they leave town because of what he had seen in the tunnels. Mary confessed that she had been part of the cult since childhood, and that she never had a choice because her father forced her into it. When Mary noticed that James seemed afraid, he angrily denied it and grabbed her shoulders. Mary pushed him away and explained that she had tried to escape the cult, but James had unknowingly ruined her chance when he caused her to miss the bus earlier. She reminded him that he had promised to stay by her side even during the worst moments, yet he was abandoning her now. As James walked away from the apartment, he noticed many people silently watching him through the windows. Back in the present, M tells another doctor that after losing Mary, James lost his connection to reality and the will to recover it. She then visits James again and explains that the horrifying version of Silent Hill he sees exists only inside his mind. If he refuses therapy, those hallucinations will eventually destroy him. After she leaves, James looks out the window and sees a woman on the street who looks exactly like Mary. Moths begin landing on the glass as the alarm sounds again and darkness spreads across the hospital. Suddenly, James finds himself standing next to Maria again. She suggests they leave together since Mary cannot be found. Noticing how much she resembles Mary, Maria leans in and kisses him, saying they could stay together there. But James pulls away and silently walks to the elevator. Maria tries to stop him, but he refuses to listen, so she decides to follow him. As the elevator descends, Maria's face occasionally becomes distorted and frightening. Eventually, the elevator stops and James enters a corridor lined with paintings he once created of Mary. Seen from above, the hallway forms a maze. Maria follows him and insists that he must accept that everything is over. James responds that she isn't real and calls her an obstacle before clutching his head in pain. The lights begin flickering. Suddenly, Pyramid Head appears behind Maria and kills her with his enormous sword. As Maria collapses in a pool of blood, James turns around and is shocked to see his own face beneath the pyramid helmet. Another memory surfaces. In the past, drunk and frustrated, James once painted a pyramid over a portrait of himself so he wouldn't have to look at his own face. It becomes clear that Pyramid Head is the physical manifestation of his guilt. The apartment in the memory suddenly distorts, throwing James into water, along with all the paintings he made of Mary. Moments later, he appears on a shoreline and sees a building burning nearby. Inside the burning structure, he finds Laura, who runs around hiding behind furniture. When she finally steps out for a brief moment, her face transforms into Mary's. Laura tells James to remember the truth. Another flashback reveals James placing flowers on Mary's grave. Her full name is Mary Angela Laura Crane, revealing that Angela, Laura, and Maria are all parts of James's imagination, each representing different aspects of Mary's personality. James runs through a burning corridor and enters a room where Angela's having a breakdown. Two grotesque hands are grabbing her legs and preventing her from escaping, symbolizing the abuse Mary suffered from her father since childhood. When James tries to help, the hands drag Angela through the mattress and he falls into the hole with her. The bed transforms into a monster, resembling Mary's father, holding Angela in its grip. James gently holds her head and apologizes, causing Angela to suddenly burst into flames and explode. After staring at the bloody remains, James leaves the room and sees Mary standing at the end of the corridor. He follows her up a staircase until they reach the roof. There, he sees Mary's body lying on a bed. This triggers the memory of when he returned to Silent Hill after their breakup. Mary had become gravely ill from the potion given by her father and had no chance of survival. She begged James for mercy. After struggling with the decision, James finally pressed a towel against her face and suffocated her while crying. Back on the burning rooftop, James finally begins to let go. The bed rises into the air as moths surround it. The sheets open to reveal Mary's monstrous form. She pulls James toward her and embraces him, showing that she forgives him. Moments later, James appears again on the normal rooftop beside Mary's body. Realizing that although she forgives him, he will never be able to forgive himself. James places Mary's body into his car and drives toward a nearby lake. The car slowly sinks into the water as James believes they can finally be together if he ends his life. Suddenly, the truck from the beginning reappears, and James finds himself reliving the moment he first met Mary on the road. This time, when the bus leaves again, James makes a different decision and offers to drive Mary to the city instead of taking her back to Silent Hill. And that's a wrap on today's recap. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a plot twist. Got a movie you want recapped? Drop it in the comments below. This is DX Recap Shorts. See you in the next one.